I was standing in that locker room, and I watched two grown men who genuinely could not stand each other shake hands and cry. That's not a business, that's a life. Thesis set up. 40 years. That's not a number I say for effect. That's how long I lived inside locker rooms most people only ever saw from the cheap seats. I main evented for the National Wrestling Alliance when the territories still meant something. I built the Four Horsemen from nothing, and I watched, up close, not from a television monitor, the rivalries that this business was actually built on. Not the ones with the flashiest pyro, the real ones. And in this business, a real rivalry only works if four things are true. I call them my four pillars, and you'll hear me come back to them again and again tonight, because every name on this list either lived up to them or was destroyed trying to. The first pillar is chemistry. Two performers who move like they were born across the ring from each other. The second is timing, because the greatest program in the world, booked a year too early or a year too late, dies on the vine. The third is personal stakes. The audience has to believe there's something real underneath the storyline. And the fourth is business impact. Because at the end of the day, a rivalry that doesn't sell tickets and move the needle is just two men fighting for nothing. Before I get into it, hit that subscribe button because I'm going to be walking you through the stories behind this business for a long time to come, and you do not want to miss what's next. Now, let's get into it. Number 10. Randy Savage versus Ricky Steamboat. I was in the building at the Pontiac Silverdome in March of 1987, and I will tell you straight, I have never, before or since, seen a match constructed with that kind of surgical precision. Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat didn't just wrestle, they composed something. The rise of this one started months earlier, when Savage, paranoid, jealous, a man who genuinely believed the world was out to take what was his, slammed a ring bell down onto Steamboat's throat and nearly ended the man's career on television. That was the trigger. It wasn't manufactured outrage. Fans in arenas across the country were legitimately furious, and that anger followed both men all the way to WrestleMania 3. The consequence was a 15-minute match that is still taught to this day as the blueprint for how to tell a story between the ropes. Every sequence built on the last. Every near fall meant something. I remember guys backstage, hardened veterans who didn't get excited about much, going quiet during that match because they knew they were watching something they'd be chasing for the rest of their careers. This connects directly to my first pillar, chemistry, because you cannot fake what those two men had. And it connects to timing too. Savage's title reign was fresh, Steamboat's sympathy was at its peak, and the company pulled the trigger at exactly the right moment. That's exactly why when people ask me what a perfect match looks like, I still point back to Pontiac. And it's exactly why the next rivalry on this list needed a very different kind of chemistry, not artistry, but pure, terrifying size. Number 9. Sting versus Vader. Sting built his reputation as the neon-painted face of WCW, a guy who could hang with anyone regardless of size. But nothing tested that reputation like Vader. The trigger here was simple and brutal. Vader came into WCW in 1992 like a wrecking ball, and the company needed someone credible enough to stand across from him without the audience laughing at the mismatch. Sting stepped up, and what followed was some of the most physically punishing television WCW ever produced. I watched Vader legitimately break Sting's nose and orbital bone in the ring, and Sting kept going. The reaction backstage was respect. Honestly, real respect. The kind you can't script. Vader wasn't just a monster on paper. He moved like a cruiserweight trapped in a big man's body, and that made every one of those matches with Sting feel like an actual fight, not a performance. This ties into personal stakes and chemistry, both because the audience believed correctly that these two men were putting their bodies on the line every single time they stepped in that ring together. That kind of raw physical stake is one thing. But the next rivalry on our list added something Vader and Sting never had to deal with: a boardroom and a betrayal that would echo for decades. Number 8. Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels. I wasn't a WWF guy in the mid-90s, but you didn't have to be in that building to know what was building between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. This one had real tension behind it. Two of the greatest technical performers of their generation, who genuinely did not like each other. The trigger, of course, was Montreal. November 9th, 1997. Vince McMahon made the call to have the referee ring the bell early during Bret's own submission hold, the sharpshooter, costing him the title in his home country without his consent. I've talked to people who were in that curtain area that night, and the chaos was real. Bret decked Vince backstage. That wasn't a work. The consequence reshaped the entire industry. Bret left for WCW. Shawn Michaels became the face of a company that had just been accused of screwing its own champion. And the phrase "Montreal Screwjob" became permanent wrestling vocabulary. This is personal stakes at its absolute peak, married with catastrophic business impact. An entire promotion's credibility hung on how the audience processed what they'd just watched. And once trust breaks like that between two performers, it changes how every future rivalry in the business gets told, including the next one, which was built entirely around a man nobody thought could ever be believable as an underdog. Number 7. Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant, by 1987, had spent over a decade as the most respected, most protected attraction in the entire industry. A man who had genuinely never been slammed. That reputation was the entire engine of this rivalry. The trigger came when Andre, manipulated by Bobby Heenan and resentful of Hogan's spotlight, turned on his former friend and demanded a title shot. The wrestling world had never seen Andre positioned as a true monster heel before, and that novelty alone sold out the Pontiac Silverdome. The reaction, over 93,000 fans by the number WWF put out at the time, watched Hogan slam a man who legitimately weighed over 500 pounds. And the pop that followed is still one of the loudest sustained reactions in the history of the business. I've talked to Hogan about that night more than once, and even he'll tell you the size difference alone did half the storytelling for him.
That's timing at its finest. WWF caught Andre's aura at the exact last moment it could still be used this way, before his health made bigger matches impossible. Hogan's slam of Andre made him the unquestioned face of the business. But being on top means someone eventually comes for you. And the next man to come for Hogan didn't do it with size. He did it with pure chaos. Number 6. The Four Horsemen versus Dusty Rhodes. Now this one, I lived from the inside. Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Ole Anderson, myself. We built the Four Horsemen into the most dominant faction the NWA had ever seen. And Dusty Rhodes was the one man the Carolina and Georgia territories genuinely believed could stop us. The trigger was July of 1985. The Horsemen attacking Dusty in the parking lot and taking a baseball bat to his ankle. An angle so vicious that it legitimately drew heat on us as performers walking through airports. That's the mark of a rivalry landing exactly right. The consequence was some of the hottest houses the NWA ever drew through the Carolinas. Dusty was the common man, and we were positioned as the arrogant, wealthy outsider standing on his neck. Business boomed. That's business impact colliding directly with personal stakes. The angle wasn't abstract to the fans in Charlotte and Atlanta. Dusty was one of them, and we had taken something from him. The Horsemen thrived on being hated as a group. But my next entry is about one specific betrayal inside that very faction, between two men who trusted each other completely. Number 4, Hulk Hogan versus Macho Man Randy Savage. The mega powers exploding was, business-wise, one of the smartest long-term plans I ever watched play out from a distance. Hogan and Savage had been a top babyface tag team, with Miss Elizabeth managing them both, and jealousy was the trigger from the start. Savage's paranoia over Hogan's closeness with Elizabeth built slowly across months of television, until Savage finally turned on Hogan directly, setting up WrestleMania 5 in 1989. The consequence was one of the best drawing matches of the era, and it worked because the audience had spent nearly a year invested in the friendship before the betrayal ever came. This is timing done exactly right. WWF let that story breathe instead of rushing it, and the payoff hit harder because of the patience. Hogan and Savage fought over jealousy and friendship. My next entry fought over something far bigger: control of the entire company itself. Number 3, Steve Austin versus Vince McMahon. By the time I arrived in WWE in 2001, the Austin-McMahon rivalry had already reshaped the entire industry, and you could still feel its aftershocks in every locker room conversation. The trigger was simple but brilliant: an authority figure, played by the real-life chairman of the company, versus a blue-collar anti-hero who represented every employee who'd ever hated their boss. Austin stunning McMahon became appointment television. The reaction was the Monday Night War, tipping decisively in WWF's favor. Ratings that had been stagnant suddenly exploded, because for the first time, the boss storyline felt uncomfortably real. That's business impact at the absolute top of the list. This rivalry alone is credited with helping win an entire television ratings war. Austin took on the boss and won the hearts of an entire era. But even Austin needed someone who could match him toe-to-toe as a performer, not just as an authority figure. And that brings us to number 2. Number 2, The Rock versus Steve Austin. I was around WWE by this point, and I can tell you, nothing in that locker room compared to the electricity before a Rock Austin match. These were simply the two biggest stars the company had. Full stop. The trigger across their trilogy of WrestleMania matches was pure competitive rivalry. Two performers at the peak of their powers, each convinced they were the true face of the business, culminating at WrestleMania X7 in 2001. The reaction was a match many still call the greatest WrestleMania main event ever, drawing what was then one of the largest buy rates in pay-per-view history. This is chemistry at its highest level. Two performers who understood psychology so completely that every strike, every kickout, felt earned rather than choreographed. Rock and Austin proved two megastars could carry an entire company on their backs. But my number 1 pick isn't about who drew the most money. It's personal, because I lived every second of it myself. Number 1, Ric Flair versus Dusty Rhodes. I said I'd give you my honest list, and honesty means I have to put my own rivalry with Dusty Rhodes at the very top, because I don't think I've ever felt personal stakes The way I felt them against that man, the trigger built across years throughout the NWA in the early to mid-1980s. Dusty, the American dream, representing the working class hero, against me, the nature boy, the limousine-riding, jet-flying villain who told audiences flat out that I was better than them. That contrast wasn't manufactured. Dusty and I built it together, night after night, in towns most people watching this video have never heard of. The consequence was some of the largest crowds the NWA ever drew. Pack after pack of fans across the Carolinas, Florida, and Georgia paging to see Dusty finally get his hands on me. Business boomed every single time we were advertised together. And that's exactly why I'm putting this one at number 1. It hits every pillar I gave you at the start. The chemistry was real because Dusty and I understood each other's psychology instinctively. The timing was perfect because the territory was hungry for exactly this kind of contrast. The personal stakes were as real as anything I've ever done because Dusty Rhodes made me a better performer just by standing across the ring from me. And the business impact speaks for itself. This rivalry helped define an entire era of Southern wrestling, closing from Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat's perfect storytelling, to Sting standing toe-to-toe with Vader, to Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels' real-life betrayal in Montreal, to Hogan slamming Andre in front of the largest crowd this business had ever drawn, to the Four Horsemen to Hogan and Savage's jealousy-fueled Mega Powers explosion, to Austin standing up to the boss himself, to Rock and Austin trading the spotlight at WrestleMania X7, all the way to my own rivalry with Dusty Rhodes. Every single one of these stories proves the same thing. Business was never really about the moves. It was about two people making you believe, even for just a moment, that what you were watching actually mattered. So I'll leave you with this. Of everything I just walked you through, which rivalry do you think could still work today? Drop it in the comments. I want to hear it.